Yeah, man. Here, I'm gonna pose a question for you now. Or a statement. I don't know what you want to call it. What's worth 9 Elon Musks? So
Oh man. Okay, wait. Nine.
nine.
Elon Musk is like 180 billion or something.
Yeah, 180. Let's just round it off to 200. Close enough,
Yeah,
right? So think of it.
that's a crazy number. What is it?
It's the student debt number for the United States. $1.6 trillion.
That is insane.
Dude, and to give you another picture, that's almost as big as Canada in terms of GDP.
That is ridiculous. Like that should not be okay in terms of the amount of debt that we need to take on.
Yeah, I mean, it's been like a button topic. Like, Joe Biden had his platform kind of talk about it recently. I think he's looking to explore into options of like student debt relief,
Right.
just because it's become such a problem for, just future generations having this overwhelming debt burden. But also, it's impacting the economy. And I think they're kind of looking at it in that lens now of
Right.
how it's impacting them in a negative manner. So they can't really grow because have to keep on paying this debt, and it's just not advancing their careers or their kind of innovation or whatever you want to call it.
Right. Right. And it holds you back, right? Like we come out of school thinking, hey, I have this expensive piece of paper that's going to get me ahead in life, but your or half your paycheck is probably going towards paying that off. And it's one of those things where even if you die, like it's not written off.
Yeah, yeah. So I think I'm not sure how it works in the States, but in Canada, I think the delinquency rate specifically, if we look at just like bankruptcies in
Right.
Ontario, because we're from Ontario, 1 in 6 individuals that are filing for bankruptcy in Ontario are student debt is a leading factor of that.
Jeez.
And let's just give you context. Like Canada itself is pretty kind of we're kind of lucky in the sense that our government and does provide a lot more funding into our institutions.
Right.
So our like tuition is not as bad, although we still complain in terms of how expensive it is. But if I look at our American counterparts, dude, like they're paying like I don't know, like upwards of 40K sometimes a year for
Right.
tuition, and really for Americans 30% are usually in default after 6 years.
Yeah. That is
So
insane.
it's wild. Like it's funny. Like I always look at this context in the sense of business, right? Like everyone wants to be an entrepreneur and do that stuff. You can't get like $100,000 to start up a business and try it out and test it out. We can get $100,000 to go to this 4-year program to get some shitty job out of school, and basically you're left with paying $100,000. So is it really providing innovation or stimulus? And the rates on these things are fucking like 6% sometimes, or even higher, depending on how you qualify for these loans. Or again, I don't know the American process, but I know in Canada they're about 6%. So it's pretty significant kind of chunk of change that's coming out for individuals that are probably making 40 to 50K when they come out of school.
Yeah, seriously. And I think one note or one point on that is in the States, I think a majority of the loans are actually by private lenders,
Yeah.
whereas for us it's guaranteed by the government. So I guess it's supposed to be safer, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that, like in terms of the government confirming or however you want to kind of label that.
Yeah, I think like maybe just the government being in usually, I think there's more control in terms of regulation, in terms of what the cost can be and what the approval process is. I think for the most part, most people that I know were able to get some sort of student funding without any issues really.
Right.
But in America, as soon as you're in your like final year, you have to kind of start planning this whole process in terms of how do I get the student funding, what's available to me, sponsorships, what kind of rates are there, and there's a lot of other variables. So from that standpoint, I feel like it's a lot more complex, and that complexity also results in a lot of bad decisions. I feel just because, like, if you look at it, you're 18 years old or 17 years old going to university.
Yeah.
You literally have like throughout your whole entire, like, say, high school life, learn nothing about like finance in general, which is another problem and another topic of its own afterwards.
Yeah.
But you literally have no common sense in terms of like what this is actually financially going to cost you. but you know it's going to pay for school because you think it's going to have an ROI later on.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I think there's like it's like, on the fence in terms of where I feel about it. I mean, there's like other like kind of ridiculous stats around this where, true, in the last 10 years alone, in Canada and the US respectively, wages have only gone up like around 4 to 6%.
Yep.
And tuition's gone up 40%.
Yeah.
So literally you're kind of already you already
That's
have
a
a pushing
10x
power, right?
variance.
So yeah, exactly. Right. So, and it's just like, hey, like I cannot carry my cost of living in terms of, the tuition and what my job is eventually going to pay me to start off with. Not to say, some kids are lucky and they get scholarships and whatnot. I'm saying for the most general, in terms of general public, a lot of our students do have like about on average 30K of debt out of school.
I think the worst part about that is when you understand the breakdown of some of those numbers, right? Because I don't think education itself, or I don't think that the curriculum itself has changed at all. A majority of those costs are coming from administrative bloating, right?
Yep.
Like you want or you want a bunch of deans and new faculty heads and more positions in the university, and not putting all the blame on salary, but that's majority of what it is, right?
Yeah, so I think there's a bunch of factors that play into this. So I'll talk about it in more of the American context. So what happened in like say like the 70s and 60s, generally speaking, like a lot of individuals that went through college, they were able to pay their tuition because it's obviously not as expensive. So when they graduated, they'd have like a summer job and pay it off, or they graduate with a couple hundred or a couple $1,000.
Yeah.
But they'll get on with their lives to pay it off within a couple of years, easy.
Right.
Right. And then came the 80s. And it seems like this guy is involved in like literally every bad thing that's happened to America. Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Like literally, like we can go into like coke, or like I should say drugs, not coke, but like drugs, the economy, the kind of gap between poor and the rich. A lot of things like kind of started with his administration because he was trying to boost America's economy in terms of more capitalistic society.
Right.
And so what we really saw here was a lot of budget cuts towards higher education.
Yeah.
And what happened is a lot of states that would receive these kind of this funding for student programs and higher education, now they're restricted in terms of their spending towards stuff they have to spend on like healthcare or infrastructure and stuff like that.
Right.
Because education is usually heavily subsidized in most states and areas. And so what we saw here was like the average cost of tuition, say in the 1980s, in terms of today's dollars, was about $17,000 at a private school,
Right.
or a private college, I should say, and about 7,900 in a public college. And now, I guess, like for our Canadian audience, we only have public colleges or universities here. We don't have private institutions.
Right.
And so, like, that's kind of the main difference that we have in, I guess, Canada versus the United States. I'm not sure if there might be a private university here and there. I'm not 100% sure. But for the most cases, we have only public universities.
Right.
So basically, with the elimination of a lot of funding and cuts around that, by 1990, so within a 10-year span, that same 17K turned to $26,000 in terms of costs.
Jeez.
Like you're thinking of like, hey, I'm going to school in the 80s,
Right.
paying about say 17K representative. 10 years later, someone who started is now paying 26K
Yeah.
for a 4-year program.
Yeah. It's like, what is going on? You know what I mean?
It's wild. Like, and I think of it. Obviously, we both went to universities here, and when we think of administrative costs, think about all those little things that they started tacking onto your tuition. Like your tuition's like say 4 to 5K,
Yeah.
but your bill would be like 7K somehow. And it's just all these little things. Oh, swimming pool cleaning fee,
Yeah.
or like library something fee, or there's like so many stupid administrative costs that were added to programs and overall tuition that I feel like a lot of us didn't get access to or used anyways, but
Yeah.
we're still charged for it. And I think, to your point, that's one of the main issues that we see within, say, schooling is just it's the university system hasn't really evolved in
Right.
terms of the product itself. And I know we had this discussion with um, Travis Retnam, who's a CEO of Knowledge Hook, and he mentioned like how the university product hasn't changed, and like there's new disrupting things that are coming out, like these smaller kind of programs, like Brain Station and those
Yeah.
kind of equivalents. And I think those have done much better in terms of the ROI aspect because they're like 6 to 7 thousand max,
Right.
and you can get jobs right out of a 3 month program. Like,
Yeah.
dude, that's insane, right? Um, and
And
so
it gives you like the real world kind of knowledge, right? Where
exactly, I think that's what separates it. Like a lot of university still teaches too much theory, I believe,
yep.
right? Versus practical application and real life knowledge. And I think that's where the kind of difference between a good, I guess, program versus bad program kind of exists. Like a lot of college students go through like experiential things, I guess you can say.
Right.
And universities, I feel like I was a lot more theory based,
Yeah.
and I feel like there has to be some change that has to come about. Like, you know, um, I remember Andrew Yang coming on Joe Rogan's podcast talking about forcing universities uh, to have limited budgets,
Right.
and where funding would be constricted, and they'll force like these private schools to have caps on their tuition.
Right.
And so Joe Rogan posed a question where, like, what if the universities fail, right? Because they're for profit, technically, a lot of these universities.
Right.
Um, Andrews Yang's like, they figured it out last time, they can figure it out now, right?
Exactly.
So, like, there's always ways. Like, obviously, as a for profit entity, they're obviously going to lobby and make excuses about a lot of things. Like, Harvard has like some ridiculous dollar amount in terms of endowment. I
Yeah.
think like 4 billion or $5 billion or something
It's a
wild like that,
crazy number.
right? And
Yeah.
so, like, if you think of that, that's a like less bigger than a lot of corporations out there, like large businesses, right? That's just their endowment. Uh,
100%. Do you think we need to kind of stop calling it that, the for-profit entity, and just call it what it is? Like you're essentially a business, right?
yeah,
You're a corporation and you're acting like one. So why are you not treated as one?
yeah, exactly. So I feel like I don't even think they're taxed on anything or whatever. I
Nope.
don't know how the university programs there work, but I just find it weird that these schools just take advantage of. I feel personally like they're taking advantage of so many kids, kind of selling them the dream of like, hey, you can be successful if you do the program, or you. I think there's another stigma in society where it's just like you have to go to
Yep.
university or you cannot succeed. But I think we're starting to break barriers into that now, where we've seen a lot of success come out of individuals not go to university. Not to say education is not important,
Yeah.
but for some, it's probably not necessary. And so don't go down that route. But it's sad to see like a lot of millennials starting to push back their lives because of the overwhelming amount of debt they have.
Right.
For example, um, pushing back when they get married, pushing back when they have kids, pushing back like several different career options and stuff like that, just because they have to prioritize, can they afford it?
Right.
Which I feel like is like pretty much like that's kind of fucked up, to be honest.
Yeah. Within our friend group, because obviously we graduated 6 years ago now.
Mhm.
And I've been noticing a lot of my friends posting up the letter that they get when you pay off your loan. It's like, congratulations, your national student loans is paid off. I'm like, this shouldn't be such a huge celebration. You know what I mean? As big
Yeah,
as it is.
yeah. I remember like I personally did the same thing. Like
Yeah.
when I had the chance, because like it's a huge accomplishment when you get to pay off that debt, and it's like a huge burden lifted off your shoulders. But at the same time, you probably were like literally living like shit
Yeah. The
for
student
like
life.
a couple
Yeah.
years,
That term exists for a reason, like live
right?
like a student.
Right. And so like when I think about like growing your life or growing your wealth, your capacity to do that is so limited with so much debt on your head. So like, hey, invest in stocks, or hey, invest in a house, or whatever it may be. I think that's limited. So a lot of individuals in our generation and younger generations are now looking towards side hustles
Right.
to kind of, I guess, break or like close the gap in terms of having a lifestyle and also succeeding and making sure they make ends meet.
Right.
So I don't know. There's a lot of challenges. I feel like government should consider like maybe a subsidization, like Biden was saying, to some of the student debt to help provide stimulus in this economy. Because if you think of it, a individual that has less debt or is not burdened by debt is much likely to pump in more dollars into the economy,
Exactly.
which obviously has a positive effect overall on GDP or innovation and stuff like that. Because there's like certain factors in kind of economic, if you think of like how economies grow, like there's
Right.
technology, human capital, and all those other kind of things that add up. And I feel like um, without that burden of debt, people can be quite successful. Not to say like, say, hey, if you want to be a doctor, I really need you to go to school.
Yeah.
I don't want you to take like a online 3 hour course and like try to certify yourself in something. Like there's certain careers that you can't just get away from that. But for the most part, I feel like you can start taking these micro courses and be successful. And hopefully there's a way that the government can introduce ways to subsidize. So like, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I feel like there should be some sort of cost cutting to help future generations and current generations to alleviate that pain.
Yeah, I think you touched on it there, and I agree with that completely because it's crazy to me that it's kind of like a blanket like statement to just put everyone into university and you need a degree. And like if my doctor has a certificate from BrainStation, I'm probably not gonna trust him,
Right.
right? But like you and me, we're in finance, like accounting. I can probably find a YouTube channel that can
Oh,
teach me
for sure.
everything that I learned about finance. You know what I mean? So there's that gap there. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're qualified. And to that point, I have friends who have CPAs and they don't know some things that they probably should know. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah, dude, I know what you're talking about. I've seen them at firms and stuff like that. Like, I've questioned sometimes, like, how the fuck did you get that role, dude? Like,
exactly.
but
Exactly. So
yeah,
yeah, to that point, yeah, doctors, please get a degree. Like that makes sense. But for accountants and some of those jobs, it's like I've probably learned 70% of what I do on my job. Like that's taught
no,
me more
yeah,
than what I've learned at university through my degree. And yes, I partied and probably didn't pay attention in some classes, but I'm talking like overall, right? Like it for the most part, I've learned more on the job and through YouTube than I have through my
for
big
sure.
bachelor finance program. So
Yeah,
that's not knocking them down, but you know,
yeah, for sure. And I feel like that's the most important thing. I think experience outweighs theory or strategy, um,
right.
and it always will. So,
I have a question on that. I think when we were in high school, you know how, and this is mostly for Ontario or Canadian students. I don't know about the Americans, but for Canadians, we had university courses and then college courses.
oh yeah,
And it
yeah,
kind of segregated that group. And like, I don't know, a lot of people, especially at my school, they looked at you weird. It's like if you went to a college course, it's like, oh, you took an easier credit. And it's like, now when I think back about it, it's like college brought together the hands-on experience and the theory part. So maybe that was a better solution,
yeah.
depending
Like,
on.
I guess like the thing is too, like employers maybe have to open up doors into that thinking and knowledge base too. Like
Right.
I feel like employers, if you don't have like, let's give our example of like our careers in accounting.
Right.
I don't think a lot of college courses focus in on accounting,
Yeah.
or are well known for accounting. Whereas if you look at other business programs across Ontario, you'll have a lot of individuals having a strong accounting program.
Right.
I think the best well known accounting programs is at Waterloo. Like they have a specific program just for accounting.
Right.
And employers can expect to know that they know theory in accounting,
Yeah.
but beyond that, it's not really practical kind of experience.
Yeah.
Versus, I don't know how what the college experience looks like. It might be the exact same, but if I were to compare someone from University of Waterloo to like, I don't know, Conestoga College. By the way, I'm not making fun of Conestoga College grads, but I'm just saying, I think the employer is always going to say, "I want the Waterloo kid,"
Right.
which I feel like is wrong. If you're technically learning this almost like the standard, because in accounting it's a standard fucking curriculum. It's
Yeah.
You really can't learn different things in different ways. I mean, from experience, yeah, there's like different ways, but theory, it's practically all the same.
I think there's a lot of that goes into it and kind of makes us choose different things. And then we kind of are siloed into a certain program or a certain school. And then we end up with all this this debt that we had to take on to take this course, and then at the end of the program, it's kind of like, all right, I got a job that's paying me $40,000 a year before taxes,
Yeah.
and I'm working like 12 hours.
Yeah.
So
Like it's wild, man.
to that point, like I think the events of this last year with the pandemic and things like that, I hope it makes some change, because it does not make sense for the students now in virtual school to be paying the same tuition as well.
Oh,
Like that's
fuck.
the biggest example of this does not make any sense.